women self-eliminate at a much higher rate than men do. And honestly, that's put us in a position where we are more likely to buy paper from colleges to even try and attempt things. So we don't even try. We just go buy before we even try. And so for women, the thing to take away is trying to apply for jobs that you think you want, even if you don't meet the paper qualifications, because the worst thing that's going to happen is nothing. It's silence. I was just having a conversation with a young lady yesterday, and she said, how do you advise people to mitigate the risk when they're applying for jobs that they're not qualified for? And I'm like, there isn't a risk. And she said, well, I can't apply to be the CEO of Tesla. And I said, why not? What's going to happen? They're not going to call you back. If they do call you back, then they'll catch you in the interview if you're not qualified. Who are you to decide that you're not a good hire because that's not your job? That's why you're applying to somebody's job. They're going to decide if you're a good fit or not, if they want to invest the time and resources. So women really need to ignore paper requirements and experience requirements a lot more than men do, because we self-censor quite a bit more frequently.
Hey everyone, I'm Jean Chatsky. Thanks so much for joining me today on Her Money, where we talk about how personal finance and money touches everything in our lives. So, how many years has it been that we have been told that we need a college degree to get anywhere in life, and that a college education is the most important thing for our careers? My entire life, I think, and probably a lot longer than that. We've been told we need to go to college to make connections that will be invaluable for us for decades to come, to land an entry-level job, to make a living wage, among other reasons. And although it's still true that with a college degree, your chances of earning more money out of school than with a high school degree sticks, the cost of college has become astronomical in many cases. According to the data collected by U.S. News and World Report, the average cost of tuition and fees for the 2023-2024 school year is $42,000 at private schools, $23,000 for out-of-state students at public universities, $10,600 for in-state students at public schools. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because when you add other expenses, housing, food, books, and more, you very quickly, with some of those private institutions, get to or cross that $100,000 per year line. With that, and the number of Gen Z grads, many with more than one degree, who are having such a hard time finding entry-level employment in their fields right now, some people are either deciding to put off college or not go altogether. According to data from the National Student Clearinghouse nationwide, undergraduate college enrollment dropped 8% from 2019 to 2022. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that slide in the college-going rate since 2018, it's the steepest that we've seen on record. My guest today, Hannah Maruyama, is one of those would-be college students who decided not to take that path. And now she is making $100,000 a year, working in AI and teaching other young people how to discover their passions without a degree. Her TikTok channel has over 400,000 followers, and she's got a new book out with her husband called The Degree-Free Way: How to Help Your 16 to 20-year-old Build the Life They Want. Hannah, welcome to the show. I'm excited for this conversation.
Jean, thank you so much for having me. I have been so looking forward to talking with you about this topic.
I am fascinated by the fact that somewhere along the way, we kind of lost this not college path. I grew up all over the country, but went to high school in Wheeling, West Virginia, the only public high school in town. And we had a huge vocational program. There was a welding department in the basement and a lot of skills training that people could use to come out and get jobs immediately. And about a third of my high school classmates took that route. a significant number of them. And I know that in the decades since, that has become a path that fewer and fewer people have followed. How did you get here? Tell me about your background.
I'll nutshell this story. It's a winding road. I also have moved around a lot, as you said that you did as well. So my dad was in the military. So I ended up going to multiple different high schools in Savannah, Georgia, where I ended up graduating from high school. I ended up dual enrolling my senior year. So I had a teacher who just said, "You're bored, get out of high school, go dual enroll at the local university." So I did. I ended up going there full time my senior year. So I did not go to a high school. This is something that I'm actually a really big fan of for parents trying to face this decision is letting their children dual enroll with an open mind. So not with the intention to go to college necessarily, but to see if it's a good fit for them to continue, especially to figure out if they actually need to go and buy a bachelor's degree to do whatever it is they'd like to do. So I ended up being able to do that. I did not do well in college, not because of grades, but because unfortunately for me, I encountered a lack of open minded critical thinking on campus. And I was not popular with my professors because of that. Asking why was not necessarily welcome, even though I was at a university, not even a college. And I distinctly remember writing an opinion piece. That was the assignment for an economics class. And the professor did not like my opinion in my opinion piece. And I was given a poor grade because of that. I took this opinion piece to the college paper and I gave it to the editor, and he hired me to write for the paper. So I ended up actually being the youngest columnist at this university paper, 17 years old, because I started dual enrolling at 16. But after about a year of that, I just was sitting in a class and just going, what am I doing here? I'm bored. I don't see the practical application for a lot of this information I'm being given. And that sent me on a path. I was sitting down taking an exam and I just thought to myself, I'm not sure why I'm here. So I don't think I should be here paying. I was also working full time because I was taking classes and I was working full time. And so I left. I broke out is what I call it, because for me, staying in would have been a poor decision, as I find out later in my life. So I left and worked a bunch of different types of jobs and ended up working in tech and in AI, as you said.
You worked as a lifeguard, you worked as a bartender, you were a deckhand on a dolphin watching boat. Talk to me a little bit about getting to AI. I mean, this range of experiences that you had. Did you think at any point that without a college degree, your choices would be limited to lower wage jobs?
I did. I think I felt that way because I had always been told that. I had always been taught that. I had always been told that. And I come from a family where there wasn't a lot of vocational creativity, not a lot of financial literacy. And so you just accept whatever you're taught in school because you don't know any different. And I didn't know to challenge it. So the way that I figured that out was actually later. So I worked, like you said, a wide variety of jobs. I think that that actually plays into my experience as well because a lot of people will say that college will help kids mature. I hear that a lot because I work with 16 to 20-year-olds. What I think people are mistaking for college causing maturity is actually just age causing maturity. Because if you start college when you are 18 years old and you get done when you are, on average, it takes 5.5 years. So about 22, 23, you would probably be a little bit more mature because you're 5 years older than you were when you started.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing because I think at that period in life, it's the transitional age, we'll call it that 16 to 20-year-old age. Those are the freest, healthiest years that you have. So I was able to travel. I was able to move around. I was able to take opportunities and jobs. And because of that, I was able to get through what most people would call your entry level career. Because in that time, I did work bartending, I worked service industry jobs. But at 22, I actually ended up getting a job at a nonprofit. And so I was getting paid $50,000 a year, which is more than the median college graduate was starting at during that time. And for me, that was something that I got without a degree, even though they said it required one, so it clearly didn't. And that was the beginning of that journey for me.
I want to stop you there because that is a very important point. And it's an important point that a lot of women in particular have trouble getting over. The listing for this job said you need a degree. You applied anyway and got the job. So, what do we take from that?
Oh, that's one of my favorite questions because I answer this a lot, actually. I come across this often. And I hear a few different things. One is I do say that a lot. Women need to be very aware of this because we self eliminate at a much higher rate, exactly as you said, than men do. It's unbelievable. And honestly, that's put us in a position where we are more likely to buy paper from colleges to even try and attempt things. So we don't even try. We just go buy before we even try. And so for women, the thing to take away is trying to apply for jobs that you think you want, even if you don't meet the paper qualifications, because the worst thing that's going to happen is nothing. It's silence. So interesting. I was just having a conversation with a young lady yesterday, and she said, well, how do I mitigate the risk? How do you advise people to mitigate the risk when they're applying for jobs that they're not qualified for? And I'm like, there isn't a risk. She said, well, I can't apply to be the CEO of Tesla. And I said, why not? What's going to happen? They're not going to call you back. If they do call you back, then they'll catch you in the interview if you're not qualified. Who are you to decide that you're not a good hire because that's not your job? That's why you're applying to somebody's job. They're going to decide if you're a good fit or not, if they want to invest the time and resources. So women really need to ignore paper requirements and experience requirements a lot more than men do because we self-censor quite a bit more frequently.
When you are a parent of a 16 to 20-year-old, or I think we have a few young listeners, if you're a young person yourself, how do you figure out if college is the right road for you or if it's not? I hear what you're saying, and I can remember being in classes in high school and in college and thinking, I am never going to use the skills that I am learning here in life. Maybe it'll teach me some critical thinking. Maybe I'll be able to have a conversation, that I wouldn't otherwise be able to have later down the road. But am I going to use this? Probably not. That never bothered me enough to get me to leave college. I was having too much fun, to be honest. But how do you know if it's right for you or not right for you?
This is a really good question. So a couple of things there. I'm going to debunk a couple of things because it is very important to do so. I think because no one does debunk these things. And I think it's important that parents have all this information. So one, that is something I hear a lot, which is, well, what about the diversity of experience that people will have and different people? College students actually have less cross-class and less cross-race interactions than they would normally just out in the world. It actually reduces that. This is a 2023 study from Kellogg from Northwestern. They did that and found that college students, were they just to be out in the world, they would actually have more diverse experiences. And then colleges created a test, an assessment called the CLA, which is a collegiate learning assessment. And this was about 10 years ago. The colleges agreed this is how we're going to measure whether or not graduates that come through our programs actually do increase in critical thinking. And they failed it at a 45% rate, a test that they designed for themselves, after which they removed the test, said that the test was bad. And then the DOE did an investigation into this because obviously there's some conflict there. So that's just something I think parents should know because those are often things that I hear. I hear that a lot. And so to answer your question, though, how to decide whether or not your child needs a college degree, the first thing that I want parents to know, and I just ran an analysis of my own, and this is something that I had seen different BLS data, different data about jobs that require college degrees. And when I say require, I mean legally. I don't mean jobs that say they require a degree in the listing, that they will hire people with the right skill set that do not buy degrees. So 7% of all US jobs require degrees. It's between 7 and 8%. Now, when I say that, I mean legally. I mean nurses, physicians, FBI agents, jobs that either due to bureaucracy require college degrees to have, or jobs that legally require a degree to get a license to do a specific job. So think, and actually lawyers don't really count because you can still read the law in several states, but lawyers for the other 46 states, right? And so parents need to treat college, I think, due to the expense and time that it's going to cost their children, as a last resort, not the first option. That is the problem. Because I think treating it as the last domino, the last card that you play when you find out it's necessary or it is going to be faster than going to get on the job training, faster than learning the skills and applying that way. So there are very few jobs where that is going to end up being the case. For the most part, you're looking at professional engineers. And when I say professional engineers, I don't mean process engineers because that's a different thing entirely. I don't mean software engineers because that's a different thing entirely. I mean literally mechanical engineers or civil engineers specifically with a license to do something, it will be probably quicker to go through college and shave off the time requirement in order to get the license required to have those types of jobs.
I understand what you're saying. You don't need a college degree to do the vast majority of the jobs in this country. There are many jobs where you just won't get in the door for the interview unless you have that degree. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, but that's not exactly what I'm asking. What I want to know as a parent, how do you as a young adult decide if college is the right path for you? Cost is definitely one factor, but it is not the only factor. Time is definitely a factor, but it is not the only factor. Maturity is definitely a factor, but it is also not the only factor. So I'd like to sort of dig in and figure out, how do you decide maybe I am one of those people for whom college is not the next move? We're going to do that in just a sec, but first we're going to take a quick break. I am back with Hannah Maruyama. She is the creator of Degree Free. You say that there are 3 conversations that parents of 16 to 18-year-olds need to have with their kids before they decide if they're going to go down the road of paying for college. Let's talk about those conversations and why they're so important.
Absolutely. So, the things that I think are going to benefit parents the most, these are kitchen table conversations that have the highest leverage for parents facing this decision with their young adults about whether or not they're going to college. The first one is literally doing research and figuring out, is it legally required? Because first, that's what we have to know. We have to know if it's legally required for us to get a job in a specific industry or specific types of jobs. Second would be, has your child been exposed to that field or that industry before? I see this and I stress this a lot, especially for girls. I have noticed that this is really important if you want to go into a healthcare field or social work field or what I would call pink collar jobs. A lot of times, girls, I believe, are funneled into these jobs by schools because they say this is your passion. Your passion is to help people, to be empathetic, to care about other people. And then they are told, in order to use those passions or those talents or those inclinations, they say, go into social work, go into teaching, go into psychology. I see this happen over and over and over again. And one of the things that I look for and that I advise parents, I actually have a really good story about this. There was a young adult I was working with in California. She's 17. She wanted to be a nurse. And so she came into my launch program, and my goal was to figure out how to get her to be a nurse faster and quicker than the traditional path, and with less financial risk in a better time frame to give her more experience. And so what we ended up doing, this is a really good example of someone who requires a college degree to do their job, right? So she wants to be a nurse. We went through all of her options. She was sure. She narrowed it down to nursing again from a wide variety of jobs I found for her that fit the criteria that she wanted for her life, and for a flexible schedule, ability to be home with her kids when she does have them, right? This is a future focused thing. And finding out that she does want to have this job, but there are also lifestyle things that are more important to her than the type necessarily of work she does. And so she ended up deciding that OR nurses is the path she's going to go. We built in an option for her to have telehealth nursing later if she ever chooses to have that option. Because basically, the way I explained it to her was, you want to have that door. Even if you never choose to walk through the door, it's good to have the door there should you ever choose to walk through it. And for her, she had one shadowed nurses that worked in the OR. And then she also had 4 sisters that were nurses. So for her, that she had proofed that concept. But I do get a lot of emails. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think you were just going to say what I was going to ask, which is, she's 17, and I've raised 2 people through their teenage years into their 20s. I've been there myself. I went to college thinking that I wanted to be a systems analyst, and I came out an English major. So it would have been a fairly natural progression for me. I was a math kid in high school. And then in college, math just wasn't working for me. And I found my way to the school paper and became a journalist. And I was incredibly grateful for that time to explore. My son went to college thinking that he wanted to be a cardiologist. He had a lot of experience with heart doctors because he was born with a congenital heart defect. He works on a sports podcast. My point is just that how do you know at 17? And how do you preserve your options to change your mind?
That's such a good question. So the way that I've answered this is by designing the launch program. So that's basically a program where I work with kids one-on-one I do 4 1-hour sessions, and I count for that because that I have found is the best way to do it. So they end up with 3 options that fit their life goals. And so when I say life goals, I mean larger things that they want in life, the way they want their life to look. Because if you sit down a young adult, they don't know what they want to do because one, they don't know a lot of jobs. That's something I found. A lot of young adults know about 6 to 8 jobs, especially if they came through public school. There's very little vocational creativity. They don't know. They don't know what's out there. So they can't really know what job they want. You do rarely get some that are very focused. That girl's one of them. She knows she wants to be a nurse. Like she's done the shadowing. She's sure as you can be at 17 about something. But for a lot of them, they just don't know. And a lot of their inclination about what they want to do is because they just don't know their options. And so I make sure that they have 3 that fit their criteria for the type of life they want to live. So focusing more on schedule, on the location that they like to be in, right? If they want to move to a certain place, if they want to stay near their family, whatever those criteria are, if they want to buy an apartment in a big city and they want to do, they want to do that in the next 5 to 10 years, or if they want to stay home and get married and, have a dog and a cat or 3 dogs and a cat and a house, those are different life goals. And so we're optimizing more for jobs that will help them live the way they want than making them put their entire life around the type of work that they're going to pursue, which if you're buying a college degree because of the cost and the time, oftentimes that's what happens. And then people graduate and then they entirely shift because they're now much older than they were when they started. And so essentially the process that I put these kids through, it de-risks the whole situation. So less time, less money, more abilities to pivot and more clear paths that do get them what they want, even if it doesn't get them there the way they originally thought they were going to go. And parents can do that.
The company that you created with your husband, Ryan, it's called Degree Free. And there are a number of pathways that you've sort of laid out that kids and their parents who think maybe not college or not college right now can pursue. Can we just talk briefly about these pathways? Because I think this gets tactical for people who think, maybe college isn't for me or my kid, but I'm not exactly sure what to do next. And as we talk through these, I think it would be helpful to talk about how do you do this in the way that will bolster your future earning power and your future choices. So the first path that you lay out is just to get a job, any job. Why does that work and why is that on top of the list?
So that one's on top of the list because for most of us, we are W-2, we're a nation of W-2 workers. We just are. And so for most people, if they don't start on this path, they will end up on it at some point, even if they become self-employed at some point. So for most people, this is the most common path, which is why it's number 1. So I say get a job because if you start working at Costco when you're 18, then you can by early mid-career, which I would define as 7 to 10 years, you're going to be out earning quite a few college graduates and you don't have to pay anything to do that. That path, which is how people used to build careers, has just been it's just been railroaded and we just push kids straight into college instead of saying, why don't you just go get a job? The main reason too is because if your child just goes out of high school to get a job in an industry that interests them, that could be TV film production, that could be software development, that could be anything, then they're going to get experience, decide whether or not they do truly want to go further into that path. And then what parents need to know is that at 25, at 25, 26, when your child fills out the FAFSA, your income is no longer going to affect their college tuition. And also, as a bonus, their brain is fully formed. And so they will know much more at that point whether or not they should put in the time and money that it's going to take them to buy a degree to go further into a path they've already stress tested by working in it. And I think that if we did that as a country, let's just say policy level, we said no one can buy degrees until they're 25. I think we would have wildly different outcomes. People would actually get their money's worth out of degrees. People that don't need to go wouldn't. And there would be probably a lot more entrepreneurs, I think. Anyway, that's an aside. Pathway number 2 is find on the job training or apprenticeship. And I actually did this with my own sister. So I have a younger sister. She's 23. She is a structural welder at a steel company. She's the only female welder that works there. She reads blueprints. She runs extremely complex laser machines. She welds pieces for skyscrapers, and she is moving into an inspector role because she's about to have enough experience to do that. I know as soon as I say welder, a lot of people stop listening because that's the default now.
Or they think Flashdance.
Right. No, she loves that movie. But I mean, who wouldn't, right? It's a great movie. But yeah, they immediately go, "Oh yeah, this is just another micro-esque talk." But when I say on the job training or apprenticeship, I don't necessarily mean the trades that a lot of people just write it off because the trades have preserved on the job training and apprenticeship better than other industries. But I also mean software development. Twitch had a $50 an hour software development apprenticeship that only required a basic knowledge of Python and CSS. A 16 to 18-year-old could sit down and have the base level of those skills in a month.
How do you find training and apprenticeship programs?
This is going to sound very silly, but I want people to get on Google and search the job title and then on the job training, your location. If you're looking for remote, you don't have to include the location part, just say remote. So this could be on the job welding training, Savannah, Georgia, or this could be software development apprenticeship, Chicago, or this could be, laser technician jobs, Hesperia, California. It could be anything.
And if you don't know the job, if you just, I mean, I'm a pretty good Googler. If I went out and just searched apprenticeship programs Philadelphia, would I come up with things?
Yes, and that's actually a really good way if you're sitting down with your young adult and they actively do not want to go to college. Like a lot of Gen Z is very skeptical and with good reason because it's very high risk for them. Then sitting down and just seeing what's available in your local area without your child having to move or leave your house, that can de-risk and put them on a direct path to one, learning something with other people and being supported, but also being paid to learn something, which is just an amazing thing that we have kind of as a country, it seems like purposely stomped out in favor of putting young adults in six figures of debt.
You say number 3 is to earn a license or certification. What do you mean?
So this is a good one too. So this is actually how I got my first tech job in 2020. I got a Salesforce administrator certification. The total cost of me getting that certification was $362. It took me 31 days to study for it. In 45 days, I had a $70,000 remote job with a 4-day work week because I had learned a targeted skill. I broke down different jobs. And this is something I tell parents to do with their kids. If they do have some idea of the income level they want or the job title, they can search it and then look at different job descriptions locally and nationally. And I tell people to do this with a yellow legal pad. And I tell them to write down and tally up the skills that they see mentioned. So this would be software development. This would be software tools. This would be systems tools, sales tools, something like LinkedIn Navigator, even if you want to go into a sales role, but also methodology. So if it's somebody that wants to be a business analyst, they're going to need to know Agile, or they're going to need to know Scrum. And so understanding and learning those things is a good way to give you the language and the words that you're going to need to get through an interview. Even entry level, even saying, I am very new at this, but I went out and learned these skills. So I have a basic understanding to come into this job. And so that could be for tech, or this could be something, a license could be a notary or a pilot. Actually, pilots have licenses, and they are not required to have college degrees. There's not a single US airline that requires a college degree anymore for pilots. And that's another example. It's extreme, but it's an example of another one.
Number 4, build a business. I mean, I guess entrepreneurship is the path that we really haven't talked about yet, but it's the path that you went down.
Yes. So I went down pathway number 4 after going through pathway number 1 by pathway number 3. Most people will find themselves on more than one at a time, or sometimes simultaneously, each pathway leading into the next one. And the reason we laid these out is because people need to know, be able to tell others what direction they're going so that they don't just say, and a lot of this is for parents because people say, "Oh, what's your kid doing?" And they just say, "Oh, I don't know, they're doing this whatever. They're just working, they're just whatever." And then instead they have an identity now. But build a business, there's two different things here. One is as simple as doing a lawn care business because that's a very low barrier to entry job, and service businesses can make one, good livings, and two, they can scale. If you can figure out basic marketing, which a lot of these Gen Zs are tech natives, and so they can figure those things out with very little time in order to understand that. But two, there's something else going on in our country, which is a lot of baby boomers are their businesses are evaporating. So they have high value businesses, their kids don't want them, and they can't find anyone to sell them to because they're somewhat complex to divest of all that knowledge and give it to somebody else. So I believe, and for parents, especially if you have more ability to do this, then instead of spending money on a college degree first, you could also just approach a local business that you have some connection to or find one. And I would not do this with restaurants. I'm talking about more service-based businesses, something that has like a skill that your child can be taught. I saw someone do this with an embroidery shop, actually. Interestingly enough, I did see this happen in real time, but approaching someone who owns a small business and saying, I will pay you, or if you will pay my child a small wage to help you, you can divest your business to my child and we will pay you, they will pay you a monthly amount of money because a lot of baby boomers with small businesses didn't plan for retirement. So this is kind of a win-win if you can ask in the right way, and there's no rules about how to do this. So it's one of those things where they're stuck, right? There's all this stranded value and they're going to have to retire and they're just going to close the doors, and all of this work, sometimes decades of work they put in, is going to just into the ether. So that's a big one.
And the last one is learn a skill, which it feels like we've sort of danced around that a bit. How is it different from the other pathways?
Sure, because this is a way to account for kids who are learning something that doesn't necessarily have a current application, but they are learning for the sake of learning. So, for instance, your one of the most high value skills in the country right now is Python, which is a coding language. If your child wants to sit down and learn Python for 6 months and build a portfolio, they may not have an idea of what job specifically or what they're going to do with that, but that can lead them to pathway number one or pathway number four. So that would be the reason. Another example would be something that's more hands on. So, mountain bike repair, right? If you live in a place where there's mountain bikes, that's a skill that you can learn that can lead you to pathway number one at a bike shop, which could potentially lead you to pathway number four, or it can lead you to just pathway number four, where you start your own service based business doing repair.
So interesting how they all interconnect. Just one more question, and then we'll wrap this up because we've given people so much. You've given people so much to think about in this conversation, and I know there's a lot that I am gonna be unpacking for the rest of the day. In your book, you've got a money matters worksheet, and you suggest that people use it to figure out what kind of job they want. And I think what you're really suggesting is decide how important earning money is to you. How do you, as a young person, put your finger on that and figure out what kind of industry it needs to lead you into?
That's such a good question. We did our very best with this. And this is something that my husband has a college degree. He has an economics degree that he talks about on our podcast frequently. He never put to use. And he says that he felt he did his research prior to going into college. And he was told that his earnings coming out of college would be $60,000 to $70,000. And he had back-to-back $31,000 jobs when he first got out of college, which is fairly common. That happens a lot. There was new research that just came out last week that shows that 1 in 4 grads are earning less than 32K. It's very common. There's a 25% chance that that's going to happen. And something that I think not enough people are focused on. We use the passion forward approach in US schools. It's like, what interests you? And then the problem with that is that what interests you when you were in high school is not necessarily going to pay enough to allow you to live the way that you want. And there's very few people, I believe, that will sustain that passion can sustain you if you are spending into the red because you didn't do the math on what you needed to exist. I think that we're seeing the ramifications of that and the fallout from that now with people my age, because I'm the youngest millennial you can have. That's how old I am. So my generation really, there's a lot of fallout from this where we're now stuck in jobs that we don't want to have, that we picked for passion reasons, poured money and time into because we didn't do the calculation of how much do I need to live in the city I want to live in, to buy a house in the city I want to live in, to to be able to have 3 dogs and have health insurance for those dogs, or to be able to have kids and pay for childcare and do things like that, you know? So this Money Matters worksheet is the best way we came up with to help parents sit down and do a little bit of a reality check about the financial needs that their child is going to have. Because a lot of kids, we're not teaching financial literacy in high school. And so they come out not knowing how much their rent's going to be, or how much it's going to cost them to buy a house should they want to do that, or just the cost of if they want to travel, right? Even if they want to, even if they want to slam their expenses to the floor and they want to spend on other things like flights or experiences, they have to make a certain amount of money to be able to cover that, or they have to be able to know where they can shrink in areas to expand in other areas that they care about. I just had a kid come through who really wants to do jujitsu. He wants to spend as much time doing it as possible, not as a job, but just out of the love. And so because of that, he needs to make a certain amount of money to be able to pay for the equipment and the gym memberships and the fees. And so the types of jobs that he ended up pursuing are jobs that allow him to pursue this interest, this love, this thing he cares about, not go work at a gym because you like jujitsu, right? Because that's how high schools typically say, oh, you're interested in this? Oh, we'll just go buy a college degree and then go try to work and get a job in that industry, as opposed to how can you make enough money and give yourself enough time with scheduling in a job to learn a language, to pursue your art, to do the things that you care about, and not have to make your job your passion, if that makes sense.
It makes complete and total sense. And it means really having a very mature dialogue about what's important to you at a very, very young age. And I think revisiting that dialogue in your 20s, in your early 30s, as you start making changes in what you're doing and how you're reskilling. So it's a fascinating conversation. Like I said, Hannah, I feel like I have so much to think about. Thank you so much for doing this with me today. I suspect that we are going to get a lot of questions from this podcast. I suspect that our listeners are going to have some very, very specific questions. If I'm right, can I talk you into coming back to do a mailbag with us?
I would be absolutely honored in a heartbeat. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here today.